Hey there, welcome back to another video. Just like last time, my name is Nick. Let's get into it. I got my notes right here like always. This one's going to be a bit of a deep dive. I'm doing a quick history on all of the professional football teams that have called Birmingham, Alabama home. I have a bit of a personal connection, not to any of the teams, but when I was a sophomore in high school, I took a sports management class, and one of our projects was what city would you expand to in the NFL? And I did my essay on Birmingham, Alabama, and I was told that it was an unrealistic city to get an expansion team, that it would never be supported. I got a C on that. So that's kind of where this whole idea came from, just kind of further expanding, looking at the history of Birmingham with its football teams. So let's get into it because we're jumping into our time machine going all the way back to 1974. The very first team Birmingham had was the Birmingham Americans. They were actually a founding member of the World Football League. They played their home games at Legion Field, which will be a pattern that you notice a lot of these teams played at Legion Field. They would finish the regular season with a record of 15-5, and they would make it all the way to the World Bowl, where they would face off against the Florida Blazers. They would win 22-21, being the first ever World Bowl champions. The team, however, would end up folding not too long after due to some financial issues. So they just lasted the one season. Some notable players for the Americans, we have Joe Profit, who is a running back. He was drafted 7th overall in the 1971 draft by the Atlanta Falcons. And then the quarterback of this team was George Myra. I'm not quite sure what the pronunciation of that is, but he was drafted in the second round, 15th overall, by the San Francisco 49ers. He played for multiple teams in both the NFL and the CFL. But little interesting tidbit about Mr. Mira. His number 10 is retired at the University of Miami, the cool one down in Florida, not the weird one up in Ohio. Birmingham did not have to wait too long for its second team, though, because the World Football League, after losing the Americans, immediately put an expansion team back in Birmingham, and they were called the Birmingham Vulcans. They also played at Legion Field, and they would have a record of 9-3. Just 12 weeks into their second season, the World Football League would fold, meaning that the Americans are the only World Bowl champions ever. The Vulcans would be considered the champions of that second season, though. There was just no actual championship game played. So they were only the champions because they had the best record. Some notable players from the Vulcans: Johnny Musso, who has been inducted into the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame and the College Football Hall of Fame. And Larry Willingham, he actually played for the Americans and the Vulcans, and he is also in the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame. And just to make it clear, the Americans and the Vulcans are two separate organizations, two separate franchises. The Americans ended, and Vulcan's brand new team, just so there's no confusion there. After the World Football League. The World League is a different league we will talk about later. After the World Football League folded up shop and headed down the road in 1975, Birmingham went without a team until 1979, when the Alabama Vulcans came in. So just like Birmingham Vulcans and the Americans, two separate, the Birmingham Vulcans and the Alabama Vulcans, no relation to each other except they have the same name. They were a part of the American Football Association. They would play to a record of 13-6, and they had two separate 5-game win streaks during the season. They would make it to the playoffs, but they would lose in the first round, and that would be the only season for the Alabama Vulcans. Fast forward a couple years to 1982, and the AFA decides they're going back to Birmingham, this time with a team called the Alabama Magic. I'm going to be completely honest. I could only find a couple things where I could get info on the Alabama Magic. So literally everything I could find, I have written down. The AFA returned to Birmingham. They played one season, had a record of 6-4, and the team cited poor attendance as a reason for why it would not return. But they were also making way for something bigger in Alabama, because the next year after that, in 1983, we get the first iteration of the Birmingham Stallions in the first go round of the USFL. In 1983, the Stallions would finish with a record of 9-9, and they would actually miss the playoffs as a 500 team, which is crazy because we have teams that make the playoffs now in the NFL when you have like a really bad um, division. Your fourth seed division winner could be under 500 if it's just a terrible year for that division. In 1984, the Stallions would finish with a record of 14-4, and they actually won their division. They won the first round of the playoffs against the Tampa Bay Bandits. Sorry, I wanted to say Buccaneers, but it's the Bandits. They won 36-17, but in the second round, they would fall to the Philadelphia Stars to a score of 20-10. In 1985, the Stallions would go on to have another good season on the field. They won their division again, this time with a record of 13-5. They beat the Houston Gamblers in the first round 22-20, and then would lose to the Baltimore Stars. There's not two teams in the USFL named the Stars. Philadelphia relocated to Baltimore. They would lose to the Baltimore Stars 28-14 in the second round of the playoffs. The league would cease operations at the end of the 85 season. But here's a little interesting tidbit I don't know if any Birmingham fans will know. With the first overall pick in the 1985 USFL draft, the Birmingham Stallions selected Jerry Rice. I think he had some bigger fish to fry in the NFL setting records, but what could have been if Jerry Rice decided, I'm going to go play in Birmingham? From 1985, we do have a few years where there's no football in Birmingham from a professional standpoint, but in 1991, the World League of American Football brings a team called the Birmingham Fire. They would go on to have a 5-6 record, and despite being under 500, they won their division that year. In the playoffs, they lost to the Barcelona Dragons in the first round. Does anybody want to guess the score of that game? Because I'll tell you, it was 10-3. What a boring game. In 1992, the Fire would finish the season with a record of 7-3-1. They finished second in their division that year and lost in the first round of the playoffs to the Orlando Thunder. The score to that game, 45-7. On September 17th, 1992, the league was put on indefinite hiatus and never returned. In 1995, Birmingham gets its seventh team in 20 years. And this time, it's in the CFL, the Canadian Football League. In the 90s, the CFL was trying to expand south of the border. Not south of the border to us Americans, south of the border to the Canadians into America. So they were expanding across the U.S., and Birmingham was one of those cities that got a team. They got a team called the Barracudas, Birmingham Barracudas. They had a pretty decent season. They went 10-8 and made the playoffs, but they lost in the first round, 52-9, to the San Antonio Texans. So if it's one thing that I'm noticing, Birmingham teams, terrible playoff performers. The owner of the team, Art Williams, decided he was going to pull the team out of out of the CFL after he made some suggestions that the league was not a fan of. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. He wanted the season to be pushed earlier in the spring so that at the end of the season, he wasn't competing with the Auburn and the Alabama football games. And he also wanted to switch from the CFL sized field to a traditional American sized football field, which the league also was not having. So he said, fine, I'm taking my Barracudas and I'm going home. After the Barracudas disappeared, had to wait a couple more years of no football to watch live other than college until one Vincent Kennedy McMahon decided, I'm going to start my own football league. In 2001, he created the XFL, which brought another team to Birmingham. This time, Birmingham Thunderbolts. By the third week of the season, the Thunderbolts had a record of 2-1, and then they proceeded to lose the remaining 7 games on their schedule to finish with a record of 2-8. Believe it or not, they didn't make the playoffs with a record that bad. They are by far the worst team that has called Birmingham home. It's not even close. There have been teams that have been, slightly under 500, but this team was 6 games below 500, and they are the only team to have that big of a discrepancy. The XFL would not have another season after the 2001 season, and they cited poor viewership as being the reason that they would not return for a second season. Now we get to the biggest time gap where Birmingham does not have a football team. It is 18 years, and the Alliance of American Football is it the Alliance of American Football? American Alliance of Football? I don't remember the league name. I forgot to write it down. Their abbreviation is the AAF. And they brought the Birmingham Iron to Legion Field. Sorry, that was my bad for not writing it down. So from February 2019 to April 2019, Birmingham had another team. But just 8 weeks into the season, right? Forgive me. Yes, 8 games into the season, the entire league shut down. The Birmingham Iron would have a record of 5-3 at the stoppage, and they had actually just qualified for a playoff spot, which never turned into anything. The leading rusher in touchdowns for this league, the entire league, was actually Trent Richardson, who I believe was a 3rd overall pick to the Cleveland Browns. I don't remember the year, but I believe he was a 3rd overall pick. And for spring football fans, you might actually you might know the guy who led the Iron as the quarterback. His name's Luis Perez. He won the XFL championship with the Arlington Renegades in 2023. And now we get to the most recent, the most successful, the epitome of Birmingham football. Birmingham Stallions 2.0. The only team to call Protective Stadium home and not Legion Stadium. In 2022, the newly rebooted USFL took the field for the first time. And actually, in the 2022 season, all 8 teams played in Birmingham. So Birmingham technically had 8 teams, even though the other 7 had their own regional markers. Like, I know there was New Orleans and Tampa, and New Jersey actually had one, Philadelphia. I'm getting sidetracked, though. In 2022, the Birmingham Stallions would have a record of 9-1, and they would go on to face the Philadelphia Stars in the championship, which they won 33-30. In 2023, the Stallions had a bit of a setback record-wise compared to their previous year when they won 8 games and lost 2. They lost twice as many games as they did in their first year. But That did not deter them. They still won the championship, this time beating the Pittsburgh Maulers 28-12. In the off season from 2023 into 2024, the new USFL and the new XFL merged, becoming the UFL. So in 2024, the first year of the UFL, the Stallions again played to a 9-1 record, becoming the best team in that league, and they actually made it to the championship for a third straight year, which they would win, becoming a spring football dynasty, this time beating the San Antonio Brahmas by a score of 25-0. And then finally, this past season, 2025, the Stallions had their worst record, their worst season since being brought back. They had a record of 7-3. They won their division, but they lost in the first round of the playoffs to the Michigan Panthers by a score of 44-29. Over the course of these 10 franchises that spans about 50 years, Birmingham as a city across all competition has a record of 141 wins, 71 losses, and 1 tie. They have seen 4 championships, 3 of those being from the most recent Stallions, and 1 unofficial championship with the Vulcans back in 1975, which they never really won the championship. They just had the best record at the end of the season, or not even the end of the season, like when the league ceased to exist anymore. So I guess that's a championship. But this is just a quick little, not quick, it's 17 minutes right now, but just a look at professional football in Birmingham. I have a couple other cities that I could do a video like this for if you guys are interested. If not, that's cool too. But until next time, I will see you later. Bye bye.